Hello, how are you? So today I am going to discuss about AWS Solution Architect Associate. So in Google, if you search aws.amazon.com, so this document you can get. So in AWS site, this document is available. It is actually explaining AWS Certified Solution Architect exam guide. Okay, so in this video I will try to discuss what is this document all about, basically the roadmap of this exam. So this is very good certification for our career, because this era is a cloud era. So AWS is a cloud leader in the market, and this exam will assess the knowledge and cloud services which AWS is providing. So if you have good knowledge in AWS services, then you can easily architect and design a very good solution for clients for their business need. Okay, so basically in this AWS solution architect exam, um, you need to have all the skills and knowledge about AWS technology, which is actually AWS services, which is focused on design and cost and performance optimize, and the most strong understanding of well architected framework. Okay, this certification also enhance the career profile and earning as AWS certified individual, increases credibility and confidence in stakeholder and customer interaction. Okay, and the good thing about this exam is this is not required any deep coding hands-on experience. Only the basic programming concept would be in advantage. So this is all about AWS solution architect, which is overall knowing the AWS services, what are the AWS services available, and how you can use and you implement in the solutions using the AWS services. If you know all the things in and out, all the AWS services, how to implement, where, when and why you can use, where you can use the AWS service to achieve your business goal, then it will be fine. So one thing is very important: you need to understand what is the AWS service and how many AWS service, and each service what is the use of that service and what can be the use cases of that service. If you know that thing, then you can easily implement a solution using AWS services. So main focus is to have a knowledge and to have a all idea about that particular service which we are going to use. And most importantly, there may be a scenario to develop a solution for a particular business requirement. Then you need to have all the AWS services knowledge, in which scenario, which service you will use, you will implement that solution using AWS services. So so the thing is, who will take this exam? So this is the answer is obvious: who is going to start their career in AWS or cloud field. So they should have some knowledge, and they should have some uh, proof also. They know the services. So this exam is very good to have a certificate and to prove yourself that you can implement solutions using AWS services. Okay, so get started for this is an experience in AWS technology strong. These are the prerequisite. Okay, and what you will learn, you will learn all the services, AWS services. And AWS services are all about compute network, storage, database, AWS services, as well as deployment and management services. Okay, the thing is knowledge and skill in deployment, managing operating workload on AWS, as well as implement security control and compliance requirement. knowledge the skill in using the AWS managed control and CLI also you can use. These are the thing which is actually AWS global global infrastructure. You need to have ability to identify which AWS service meet given technical requirement and define the technical requirement on for AWS based application. What does it make to earn this certification? To earn the certificate, you need to take and pass AWS certificate exam, okay, which is AWS Certified Solution Architect exam SSA C03. Okay, in this you will have two kind of choices, which is multiple choice and multi-response. So this is all about, and you can also download the exam guide. In this video I will later on discuss the exam guide also, which is I have downloaded this exam guide. Okay, and here you also can get the sample question also. And if I talk about the exam overview, then it is associate level exam, and it will have 130 minutes to complete the exam, which is about 2 or 10 minutes, and the cost will be $150. This exam is very important. Okay, so that's why the amount is high. You will get 65 question, and delivery will be a review center or online. You can do this exam from home as well. So you just prepare for this exam, schedule the exam, and pass the exam. Okay, there are many languages in which this exam you can do, which is English, French, German, Italy, Japan, Korean, and these are the languages. Prepare for your exam. This is most important thing. If you are not prepared, then you cannot pass this exam. Okay, so you have to strategize all your learning and preparation to get clear this exam. Now it's time to build knowledge and skill to propel your career. So there are resources, training, AWS resources, certification, uh, which you can do. Okay, and skill builder is also there. You can take trainings, and Udemy is there, and AWS documentation is also there, YouTube, Google. So many resources are there. You just need to have all the knowledge. You have to memorize everything. You need to understand the logic behind everything and how to apply in exam. So these are the things. So without wasting any time, we just go to this exam guide. Okay, the exam guide available over here, and I have already downloaded, so I will open that one and we'll discuss about that. Okay, okay, this is the exam guide. Okay, very good exam guide we have, so we will discuss about this. Okay, so AWS Solution Architect Associate Exam Guide. Uh, this is about this exam. So in this, what actually the requirement is to design a solution. Okay, so exam validate ability or ability use AWS technology to design solution based on well architected framework. Okay, and so here what is the thing you need to actually follow. uh, design a solution, incorporate AWS service, meet current business requirement and future project need. Okay, need to design a solution using AWS services to meet the current business requirement as well as future projected need. So this is very important. And design architecture that use secure, resilient and high performance and also cost optimized, right? So these all the things you need to have in your design. So and after that, once you did that and it is working fine and everything going good, then again you need to review existing solution and determine the area of improvement. Okay, and again you can apply some changes to optimize all the things. Okay, so these three things you need to do as a solution architect. So how you will do it? So when you need to get all the knowledge, you need to get certified and you need to do project which is involve AWS. Okay, so target audience is actually which is who are having at least 1 year hands-on experience, cloud solution design and all. So those are the actually best candidate to do this. So in this exam contain, if we talk about the responses type, there are 65 question and there would be multiple choice question. One answer will be correct out of four and multiple responses also will be required. So two or more correct answer, most probably two correct answer required out of five or more responses. So you need to do that. And one more very good thing is there is no negative marking, so no need to leave any question. You just guess anything. If you leave, then it will be considered as a wrong answer, so that will impact your result. So make sure all the answer, all the questions will be answered. Okay, and the next thing is uh, so exam result. So after once you submit your exam, then pass fail notification will be there, and couple of days you will get the scorecard. So that will be 100 to 1000 and 720 mark. If you get, then you can pass, and exact scorecard you can get in mail. Okay, so here this exam is actually divided into four domain, and the percentage of exam each domain is like there is a design secure architect. So this is a 30% stake in the exam, and design resilient architecture which is 26%, design high performing architecture which is 24%, and design cost optimized architecture, so that is 20%. So overall this is 100% in total. So four area you need to actually focus, that is secure, resilient, high performance, and if on after all cost optimization. The system should be least expensive, the cost should be minimal. Okay, and it should be highly secure, resilient and high performance. So everything will be high except cost should be minimum, because every organization or business should limit their expenditure. So this is the thing. Now talking about the domain one. So design secure architecture, which is actually uh, secure architecture. So in this, the task statement one is design secure access to AWS resources. Okay, so our main task is to design a secure secure access to AWS resources. So here you need to have a few things. You need to have a knowledge and few skill you need to have to design secure access AWS resources. First of all, you need to create AWS resources which we required for your solution. Okay, so access control and management across multiple accounts. This knowledge you need to have. AWS featured access and identity service. For example, AWS access and identity management IAM, and AWS single sign-on, AWS SSO, AWS global infrastructure. For example, availability zone, AWS region, and AWS security best practice. For example, principle of least privilege. Okay, the AWS secure responsibility model. And once you have this knowledge, then is a certain skill also you have. So skill is like applying AWS security best practice to IAM user and root user. For example, multi-factor authentication MFA, designing a flexible authorization model that include IAM user group role and policies. Okay, designing a role based access control strategy. For example, AWS security token service, AWS STS, role switching across account access, and designing a security strategy for multiple AWS account. For example, AWS control tower service control policy SPC, determine the appropriate use of resources policy for AWS services, determining when to federate a directory service with IAM role. And the task 2 will be design secure workload and application. So you need to have a knowledge of application configuration and credential security, AWS service endpoint control, port protocol and network traffic on AWS, secure application access security service with appropriate use case. For example, Amazon Cognito, Guard Duty, MMSE, threat vector external to AWS. For example, denial of service, SQL injection. A skill you need to have is design VPC architecture with security component. For example, security group, root table, network ACLs, net gateway, determining network segmentation strategy. For example, using public subnet and private subnet. In integration, AWS services secure application for AWS Shield and AWS WAF, AWS SSO, AWS Secret Manager. Securing external network connection to and from the AWS cloud. Okay, for example, VPN, AWS Direct Connect. And then now task statement 3, determine appropriate data security control. Okay, so you need to have data access and governance, data recovery, data retention and classification, encryption and appropriate key management. Skill in, you need to have skills like align AWS technology to meet compliance requirement, encrypting data in rest. For example, AWS key management service, AWS KMS, encrypting data in transit. For example, AWS Certificate Manager ACM using TLS, implementing access policy for encryption key, implementing data backup and replication, implementing policies for data access lifecycle protection, rotation encryption key, and renewing certificates. So this is all about domain 1, and now we will discuss about domain 2, which is design resilient architecture. uh, Task statement 1 is design scalable and loosely coupled architecture. Knowledge of, in this you need to have a knowledge of API creation and management. For example, Amazon API Gateway, REST API, AWS managed service with appropriate use case. For example, AWS Transfer Family, Amazon Simple Queue Service, Amazon SQS secret management, caching strategies, design principle for microservices. For example, stateless workload compared with stateful workload, even event driven architecture, horizontal scaling and vertical scaling. So horizontal scaling and vertical scaling is like, in vertical scaling, you just improve the power of a single machine by adding up RAM or CPU or hard disk. Okay, but in horizontal, you just adding the more and more machine. So in air surface area, you just parallelly, horizontally, you are just increasing the machines, but in vertical, you just adding more resources in a single machine, so it will vertically enlarge. Okay, so that kind of thing it is. How to appropriate use edge escalator. For example, content delivery network, CDN. How to migrate application into containers, load balance concepts. For example, application load balancer, multi-tier architectures, queuing and messaging concept. For example, publish and subscribe. So this is basically, the message is like, if you are producing message, then you will publish, so that other can you easily get it or extract it. And if you are trying to extract a message, then you will definitely subscribe and use. So this is the thing. Serverless technology and platform. For example, AWS Fargate, AWS Lambda, storage type with associate characteristic. For example, object, file, block, the orchestration of container. For example, Amazon Elastic Container Service, ECS, Amazon Elastic Kubernetes Services, AKS. uh, when to use read replicas. Okay, workflow orchestration. For example, AWS step function. Skill you need to have for this is design event driven microservice and or multi-tier architecture based on requirement. Determine scaling strategies for component used in an architecture design. Determining AWS services required to achieve loose coupling based on requirement. Determining containers. Determining when to use serverless technologies and patterns. Recommending appropriate compute, storage, networking and database technology based on requirement. Using purpose built AWS service for workload Task 2, designing highly available and fault tolerant technology. Knowledge of AWS global infrastructure, for example, availability zone, AWS region, Amazon Route 53, AWS managed service with appropriate use case, for example, Amazon comprehend Amazon Poly. Basic networking concept, for example, route table, disaster recovery, DR strategies, for example, backup and store, pirate light, warm standby, active failover, recovery point objective, RPO, recovery time objective, RTO, distributed design pattern, failover strategy. So this is also required, and failover strategy, immutable infrastructure, load balance concept, example, application load balancer, proxy concept, for example, Amazon RDS proxy service quotas that are throttling, for example, how to configure the service quotas for workload in standby environment, storage option and characteristic, for example, durability, replication, workload visibility, for example, AWS X-ray. Skill you need to have in this: determining automation strategy to ensure infrastructure integrity, determining the AWS service required to provide a highly available and fault-tolerant architecture across AWS region or availability zones. Identify a matrix-based metric based on business requirement to deliver a highly available solution, implementing design and my mitigating single point of failure, implementing strategies to ensure the durability and availability of data, for example, backup, selecting an appropriate DR strategy to meet business requirement, using AWS services that improve the reliability of legacy application and application not built for the cloud, for example, application change or not possible, using purpose built AWS service for workload. Now talking about domain 3, design high performing architecture. Task statement 1, determine high performing and or scalable storage solution. Knowledge of hybrid storage solution to meet business requirement. Storage services with appropriate use case, for example, Amazon S3, Amazon Elastic File System, EFS, Amazon Elastic Block Storage, EBS. Storage type with associated characteristic, for example, object file block. Skill in determining storage service configuration that meet performance demand. Determine storage service that can scale according to future need. Task statement 2 is design high performance and elastic compute service. Knowledge, you need to have knowledge about AWS compute service with appropriate use case, for example, AWS batch EMR for gate. Okay, distributed compute concept supported by AWS global infrastructure and edge service. Queuing and messaging concept for publish and subscribe. Scalability capability with appropriate use case. For example, uh, for example, scalability capability with appropriate use case, which is EC2 auto scaling, auto scaling. Okay, serverless technology and patterns. For example, Lambda and Fargate, the orchestration of containers, which is ECS and EKS. Skill, you need to have decoupling workload so that component can scale independently. Identify the matrix and condition to perform scaling action. Selection, selecting the appropriate compute option and feature. For example, EC2 instance type, which is uh, meet the business requirements. Selecting appropriate resources type and size. For example, the amount of lambda memory to meet business requirement. Okay, so the task statement 3 in this is determine high performing database solution. Knowledge, you need to have a knowledge of AWS global infrastructure, for example availability zone and regions, caching strategy and services, for example Amazon elastic cache, data access pattern, for example read intensive compared or write intensive compared. For example, some database require a very frequent read select performance, and some database are very highly insert and update oriented, so you need to choose which one is. Database capacity planning, for example capacity unit, instance type, provision, IPO, input output, database containers and proxy, database engine with appropriate use case, for example heterogeneous or homogeneous migration, database replication, for example read replica, database type and service, for example serverless, relational, compared and non-relational in memory. Okay, so in this you need to have a few skills, which is configure read replica to meet a business requirement, designing database architecture, designing an appropriate database engine. Okay, for example MySQL or Postgre or Oracle, whatever database engine you need to have, we need to just select that one in database service as a database engine. So determine appropriate database type. So database type is like Amazon Aurora or DynamoDB. Integration caching meet the requirement. Statement 4, determine highly performing and scalable network architecture. Knowledge of edge networking service with appropriate use case. For example Amazon CloudFront, AWS global escalator, how to design network architecture, for example subnet tier routing, IP addressing, load balancing concept, for example application concept, network connection option, AWS VPN connect, and private link. Skill which is required here, network topology for various architecture, for example global hybrid multi-tier, determine network configuration that can scale to accommodate future need, determine the appropriate placement of resources to meet business requirement, selecting the appropriate load balancing strategy. Text actually statement 5 is high performing data ingestion and transformation solution you need to know is data analytics and visualization services, for example Athena, lake formation and QuickSight. Data ingestion pattern like frequency, monthly, daily, how data will be ingested. Data transfer services with appropriate use case, for example AWS data sync, AWS storage gateway, data transformation service with appropriate use case, for example AWS glue, secure access ingestion, access point size and speaks needed to meet business requirement, streaming data service with appropriate use case, for example Amazon Kinesis. Skill required in this is building and securing data lake, designing data streaming architecture, designing data transfer solution, implementing visualization strategy, selecting appropriate compute options for data processing, for example uh, Amazon EMR, selecting appropriate configuration for ingestion, transferring data between format like CSV, Excel, text or perpetuate, whatever it is. And now last but not the least, domain 4 is cost optimization. After doing everything, achieving everything whatever we want and how optimize we want, everything is subjected to money, right? So AWS having a pay as you go concept. For example, you are using a service like mobile phone service, right? So you can use service until certain amount of time for which you have subscribed and you have top up a service for that time, you can use that one. So similarly AWS is having a services, whatever service you are using at certain time you need to use and accordingly you need to bill. So AWS is having per second billing plan. So every second your bill will be generated. For example, you have 10 minutes 7 second usage. According to that you will be get bill for that period of time. Okay, so cost optimizing something to minimize and to optimize the cost, which is overall goal is to limit the cost of the services which is as expected, and it should be a cost optimized, and it should not be like you are spending more and more money and and you are getting services which you required. So here the overall objective is to get the best services and as well as the minimum cost. So how to reduce cost of the particular service which is required. So this is the overall idea in this one. Okay, so cost optimize architecture you need to develop so that overall cost should be minimal. Okay, so for that what you need to have, or need to know the knowledge of access option, for example S3 bucket, request pay, object range, storage, and AWS cost management service feature, cost allocation tag, multi account billing, AWS cost management tool with appropriate use case, for example AWS cost explorer, AWS budget, AWS cost and usage report, AWS storage service with appropriate use case, for example Amazon FSX, Amazon EFS, and Amazon S3, Amazon EBS. Backup strategy, block storage option, for example hard disk HDD, volume type solid state drive SSD. So we have two options, HDD and SSD. So HDD is cheaper than SSD, and SSD also low as compared to SSD. So we need to understand what is the requirement. If low speed is okay, then we can use HDD to minimize our cost, and if it is high speed RAM is required, then we definitely go to SSD, and the drive should be SSD. Okay, we cannot do anything otherwise. We have option to use HDD, so that we can save some money on this side. Data life cycle, for example, you need to have data for 1 week or 1 month or 1 year only, then you can use a life cycle. Okay, after that you can just delete or just archive that data, and later on you can delete if it is not required. So it will save our space, and it will save cost as well, because the disk will be free and it can utilize. Hybrid storage option, data sync transfer, family storage gateway, storage access pattern, storage tiering, for example code code tiering, for example storage type with associate characteristic, for example object, file, block. Skill in designing appropriate storage strategy, for example batch uploads to Amazon S3, comprehend with individual upload. Determine the correct storage size for workload, determine the lowest cost method of transferring data for workload to AWS storage. Determine when storage auto scaling is required. Managing S3 object lifecycle, selecting the appropriate backup and archival solution, selecting the appropriate service for data migration to storage services, selecting the appropriate storage tier, and selecting the correct data life cycle for storage, selecting the most cost efficient storage service for a workload. Statement 2 here is design cost optimized compute solution. Okay, the first one is for cost optimized storage solution, and this is for compute solution. Okay, so knowledge of AWS cost management service feature, for example cost allocation tag, multi-account billing, and AWS cost management tool with appropriate use case, cost explorer, budget, cost and usage report. AWS global infrastructure, for example availability zone, AWS region, AWS purchasing option, for example spot instance, reserve instance, saving plan. Distributed compute strategies, for example edge processing, hybrid compute option. For example, AWS outputs AWS knowledge, instance type, familiar and size. For example, memory optimized, compute optimized, visualization, optimization of compute utilization. For example, container serverless computing, microservices, scaling strategy, auto scaling, hibernation. Skill here you need to have is determining an appropriate load balancing strategy. For example, application load balancer layer 7 compared with network load balancer layer 4 compared with gateway load balancer, determining appropriate scaling method and strategies for elastic workload. For example, horizontal compared with vertical EC2 hibernation. Determine cost effective AWS compute service with determine the cost effective AWS compute service with appropriate use case. For example, Lambda, Amazon EC2 for Git. Determine the required availability in different classes of workload. For example, production workload, non-production workload. Selecting the appropriate instance family for workload. Selecting the appropriate instance size for workload. Task 3 is design cost optimize database solution. You need to have knowledge about AWS cost management service feature. For example, cost allocation tag, multi-account billing, AWS cost management tool with appropriate use case. For example, cost explorer, AWS budget, AWS cost and usage report. Caching strategy, data retention policy, database capacity planning, capacity units, database connection and proxy, database engine with appropriate use case. For example, heterogeneous migration, homogeneous migration, database replica. For example, read replica, database type service is, for example, relational component or relational Aurora DB, DynamoDB. You need to have a skill like designing appropriate backup and retention policy, snapshot frequency, determining an appropriate database engine, for example MySQL or with Postgre, determining cost effective AWS service and determine cost effective database type, series formats, columnar format, migration database schema, and data to different location, different base database engine. The fourth one is cost optimize network architecture. So again the thing is same, the only different kind of resources is changing. For example, you need to have a cost management service feature, cost allocation tag, multi account billing, AWS cost management tool with appropriate use case. For example, Cost Explorer, AWS budget, cost and usage report, load balancing concept, application load balancer, net gateway, net instance cost compared with net gateway cost, network connectivity, for example, private line, dedicated line, VPNs, network routing topology and peering, for example, AWS transit gateway, VPC peering, network service with appropriate use case. For example, DNS, the skill required, configure an appropriate net gateway type for network, for example, single shared net gateway compared with net gateway for each availability zone. Configure an appropriate network connection, for example, direct connect compared with VPN compared in internet. Configuring appropriate network route to minimize network transfer cost, for example, region to region, availability zone to availability zone, private to public, global accelerator, VPC endpoint. Determining a strategy need to contain delivery network, CDN, edge caching, reviewing existing workload of network optimization, and selecting an appropriate throttling strategy, selecting the appropriate bandwidth allocation for a network device, for example, a single VPN compared with multiple VPN, direct connect speed. And here are some tool technology which is covered, like compute, cost management, database, disaster recovery, high performance, manage and governance, microservices and component decoupling, migration and data transfer, networking, connectivity and content delivery, resilience, security, serverless, event-driven design principle and storage, and AWS service and feature analytics. You have Amazon Athena, AWS data exchange, data pipeline, EMR, glue, kinesis, lake formation, managed stream for Apache Kafka, MKS, OpenSearch service, Elastic service, QuickSight, Redshift. Application integration, you have Airflow, AppSync, Event Bridge, CloudWatch, EventMQ, simple notification service, SNS, simple queue services, SQS, AWS step function, and cost management. You have budget, cost explorer, cost usage report, saving plan, compute. You have batch, EC2, auto scaling, elastic bench, talk, hotspot, serverless application repository, VM, cloud on AWS, wavelength, containers. You have elastic container registry, ECR, contain elastic container service, ECS, anywhere elastic kubernetes service, ECS, EKS anywhere, and distro database, Aurora serverless, document DB with MongoDB, compatibility, DynamoDB, Elastic Cache, Keyspace, Apache Cache, Neptune, Quantum Ledger Database, QLDB, RDS, Redshift, time stream. Developer tool is AWS X-Ray, and front end web and mobile, AWS Amplify API, device form, PyPoint. Machine learning, you have, actually these are the thing machine learning. You have forecast and rate and all, and these are all the network content delivery and all. Storage you have backup, S3, Glacier, and security you have artifacts, manager, Cognos, and all. So these are the services you have category wise. Okay, so right, and one few more thing is actually out of scope also. These are the things. For example, developer cloud 9 light CDTC is not covered in this exam. I think hope you understood what actually I am trying to explain you in this tutorial. So these are the subject wise services. If you see here, all the services which will be asked, these you should know. Okay, in this exam. So these are the services, and for example, machine learning, governance, media service, okay, networking, content delivery, and server test storage. And these are which is not covered in this exam. This service related question will not be asked. Okay, machine learning, this tool will not be asked, and media and all. And if you see, these are the machine learning service which will out of scope, and here you will get machine learning service which is in scope. For example, comprehend, Kendra, length, poly, these are in scope. So this is overall exam guide in this. So basically what actually is required to have basic knowledge and implementation level knowledge, so that you can use this service and you can apply and you can provide a solution. So if you have end-to-end knowledge of these services, then you can easily implement a solution using uh, these AWS services. So we need to read, we need to study all the services of AWS, and we need to practice all the services in order to design a solution. But the main thing here is, while designing a service, you need to actually have this point in your mind. These are the thing is, it should be secure, high performance will be there, and resilient, and it should be cost effective, cost optimization should be there. Okay, so this thing which is very very important, and these are the domain. Okay, so in every domain you have a specific requirement service. You need to have some experience, some knowledge, and some skill also in order to um, provide a solution. So the first thing is storage related, and the next thing is your compute related, storage, compute, and then database, and then last one is uh, network, and fifth one is transformation solution. So in each domain you have task statement which is storage related, and compute related, and database related, and network related, So these are the things. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So 4 domain and 5 services: compute, storage, network, and database. So thank you so much for this, and hope I will come again with more detailed service explanation, so that you can understand and you can achieve this exam. Thank you so much. Bye bye.